This is TWiT.
What do you tell kids in the middle school years? No frontal lobe, no executive function.
Well, you knew you did what you did when you were their age.
Their every move is recorded on social media and posted on Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok.
Right. All of their relationships with their friends are intermediated by technology. Now, right? That's
there's no more passing notes.
No, and that's one of the permanent changes, I think, from COVID, is COVID pushed all of the relationships online, and only 20% of it came back to in-person. Like, you will see, we'll have a group of 15-year-olds in our basement, and we're like, we've got a pool table and a foosball table, and they're all sitting there texting each other
in the same
quietly.
daggum room.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that.
They're sharing a pizza. You have kids?
Yes. I have hard heads, and they sit in the same room.
High schoolers.
And
one in college.
Text each other in the same room. Like, you're sitting right there.
My kids are 30 and 27, so I dodged this bullet.
Yes.
The internet was there, but they were using AIM. I even thought it weird. She would do, my daughter who's 30 now would do her homework with music and AIM and a video chat going on and all that stuff. But this has gone beyond that.
But she didn't have a phone in her pocket with a camera. It's the camera that gets them in trouble.
It's the camera.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I talk to the kids, there are obviously all kinds of bad things that happen to kids, but the really horrible, tragic outcomes, right? I'm not going to name any of the teenagers, but I when I teach my class, I talk about teenagers who actually ended up taking their own lives while I was CISO of Facebook, right? Due to them being exploited in some way.
God, yeah.
And those situations are because the kids didn't have anybody they could turn to that they felt that they could talk to once they made a mistake, once they kind of slipped up a little bit, that for them there is no outcome other than to take their own lives, right? And so I think a big thing that I say to the kids is, one of the metaphors I have is, I ask the kids, has anybody here ever been really badly hurt? Had an accident? And one kid raises their hand. I'm like, yes. And he says, oh, I ran through a plate glass window once. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's a good one, right? Like a glass door. Was it scary? He's like, yeah, I was covered in blood. I was bleeding everywhere. And the kid's like, ew,
Cool.
Yeah. And I ask him, so when you did that, were your parents angry at you? No. What were they? They were scared.
Right. And
that's what you have to teach these kids is like, yes, your parents spend all the time being angry about you about not turning in your homework or not walking the dog or fighting with your sister. When you're in real trouble, your parents want to protect you.
Boy, that's so good.
And you need to go, if you get into if you're talking to somebody online and you're like, I don't think this person is who they say they are. Or if you've done something like sent a photo to somebody and regretted it, it is much better for you to go talk to your parents at that moment than to try to fix it yourself. Because the worst outcomes are when you try to fix it yourself. And for the really bad child abusers, they know that. And so they create a Stockholm syndrome, a fake relationship where it's you and me against your parents.
There's a horrific story just happened in Santa Rosa up here. Teenage girl catfished.
Yes.
Guy figures out where she lives, comes to her house, kills her mother and her grandparents, and abducts her and drives off with her.
Wow.
Horrific story because she was catfished.
Right. That's like the worst outcome is when you have in-person abuse.
They, by the way, they caught him and she escaped safely, thank God, and they've got the perpetrator. But her parents, mom and her grandparents are gone.
Yeah.
Horrific story.
Right.
And that's catfishing. That's posing as
it's
somebody
catfishing,
else.
and then where catfishing often goes, where it becomes really harmful, is called sextortion, where you trick a kid into giving you a naked photo, and then you leverage that into more and more control over their behavior.
A parent, good friend of mine, just happened to a 17-year-old.
Yes, it's extremely common. And that's where you need to teach your kids, one, you don't want to be victim blaming, but you also want to teach kids, like, you don't send naked photos to your friends. Ever. It's like, you have to teach teenage girls that teenage boys are idiots, right? Like, I don't think they understand how dumb we were, and maybe still are, but certainly how dumb I was when I was 15 years old. Yeah. They have teenage boys have no impulse control, no ability. And so you have like these, nobody dies, but it's a big deal if you end up with a naked photo being distributed with friends, and it's technically distribution of child sexual abuse material. Technically, a bunch of those kids are committing a felony.
Well, but the next extortion could go far worse.
Right. But Right. That's bad. And then if it goes worse that person that you shared the image with is an adult who's an extortionist, then they will turn that into a multi-month hell. And so we had this guy who...
That's where you get suicides. That's
where you
really
get suicides.
sad.
And we had this guy who we called the worst man on Facebook, which is like a pretty high bar. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And we spent 2 years tracking this one guy because his OPSEC was perfect. He never made a mistake. He never used a real phone number. He never used a real IP. He was on tour all the time. And he approached thousands of teenage girls. It turns out later we find out he was tracking how he was approaching them and what approaches were statistically more successful. Right. Wow. And then he would usually, what I guess was successful was he'd make them think of like, oh, I know you sent a nude to your boyfriend. I was able to hack it. Why don't you send me another one and then this will be over with. He doesn't have a real nude.
It doesn't have anything.
But 4%, 5% of the girls might believe it, right?
Conversion rate.
And so that's the kind of situation that you need to teach your kids. If you get that message, we're not going to be angry at you. Even if you did send your boyfriend nude, you can come talk to us and we can help you out of this problem.
No.
And instead,
you talk to the parents too?
It's good that you're giving this to these 8th graders and young kids, but are you speaking to the parents as well and speaking to just adults in general? Because a lot of times people my age and a little bit younger are a bunch of know-it-alls and don't know when it comes to the security
and
stuff.
We're gonna talk.
And then when I
it's
talk
not just
to
know-it-alls.
people,
It's just. So I mean, I talk to people on the radio all the time.
Ignorance is another thing.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the people that are know-it-alls.
Just
when I
make up
try to
stuff.
explain things to people about even just password sanitation,
Oh, no,
they look
I
at
don't
me
even-
as if I'm
crazy.
talking out the side of my neck and I'm going overboard over security. What is your approach?
We do talk to parents. Part of what you talk to parents about is create that open line of communication. Also, you have to have the expectation until your kids are out of your house, they have no privacy on their phone. I mean, it sucks to say it.
Oh, I know that.
You know that, right? And so spot checks. And what will happen is we've had this with our kids where we say only one of them has a full-time phone.
Right.
It's time for a phone check. And they will preemptively admit something. Now, so far, everything that's been admitted has been kind of small potatoes, right?
Wow.
But you want that.
You planted the seed.
Yeah, you planted the seed.
Yeah.
And you create a situation where like they now have permission almost to share with you, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think for parents, part of the problem though is the technical controls parents have suck, right? Like the good thing that Apple's finally made some progress here, and I think Apple's the company that has the most opportunity, at least in the US, because they dominate, teenagers.
Right.
Is they now have the ability to classify photos as they leave your kid's device to see if they're naked photos and to stop them from leaving the device.
This was very controversial when Apple proposed this.
Well, there's two different things. There's a part where they're actually scanning your photos as on the device.
Right.
And I opposed that so much I wrote a New York Times op-ed.
I remember.
Right. So I wrote that part, but at the same time they announced something I think is great, which is you could say this is a kid. They should not send naked photos.
This is totally in the hands of parents. This is
totally
not going back to the corporate or anything.
Yeah. Right, and it never calls the cops.
Yep.
It never does anything. It doesn't even tell the parents.
Right.
It just stops the photo from being sent.
Right. And it even warns kids, are you sure you want to send that? It's good. It's actually, I think, well done.
Right. And I think those kinds of interventions.
Parents have to turn that on, by the way, should mention that.
Yeah, you have to turn it on. I think it's under screen time settings. And so I think setting the screen time settings. So the other thing for kids is teenagers want to be on their phones all night. They don't get any sleep. And so having the phone turn off at 9 or 10 p.m., whatever
That's good for adults.
Yeah, no, I think so.
I hate to tell you.
No, I'm bad at that. But at least I could fix my problems with my kids. Right. Doing the screen time limits and then having no expectation of privacy. And I'd like to see companies get more aggressive about those kinds of limits on, hey, it looks like you're sending a naked photo. Is that something you really want to do? Here's some things that you should read first before you do that, right? And to at least because again, you said no frontal lobe, right? Like their decision making is
just
really
create
weak.
a friction.
And so create that friction that they have to think about it, I think is a good thing.
Hey folks, I'm Ant Pruitt and I have a question for you. How do you think your hardworking team, with a Club TWiT corporate subscription plan, of course, show your appreciation and reward your tech team with a subscription to Club TWiT? Keep everyone informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech. With the Club TWiT subscription, they get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. And they also get access to our members-only Discord, access to exclusive outtakes and behind-the-scenes footage and special content like the fireside chats that I enjoy hosting. Plus, they also get shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. So, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.